Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to my car. I would normally wait to intro this video until I looked better and I had a prettier background and everything, but I am just too excited to get started with this vlog and reading these books that I am filming this at the earliest possible moment. It's actually the last day of Summerween right now, which I was participating in and vlogging, but I finished my last book this morning. So I was like, you know what? Summerween is done. I've already edited and posted that vlog actually, so you can go watch that on my channel if you missed it. And now I am ready to move on to book of the month. If you're new here, I do a series on my channel where I vlog reading all of my book of the month picks whenever I have them. I am not sponsored by Book of the Month. I am just a regular member. And let me tell you, this was the first month in a long time that I had trouble narrowing it down to just 3 books for my box. They had so many good titles, and I know I'm not alone in thinking that. So let's just get to them right away. I picked 3 books for this box. I can't remember which ones were main picks and which ones were add-ons, but the one that I'm probably the most excited about is Upgrade by Blake Crouch. Blake Crouch is one of my favorite authors. He writes sci-fi books. Dark Matter and Recursion are the 2 that I've read by him and gave them both 5 stars. He has more of a backlist, but I haven't read any other books by him yet. But this is obviously his newest release. All I know is that it has something to do with DNA. And I love his books because they are sci-fi, but they're not too heavy into the science, and they usually have kind of an action-y thriller element to them. My husband has actually already read this book too, and he said he enjoyed it, so I am so excited to get into this one. So I was very happy to see this as an option. The second book that I picked up is another very anticipated book for the year, Ruth Ware's The It Girl. This is a thriller. Ruth Ware is a very popular thriller author. I have read her entire backlist. All of her books, I believe, for me, have ranged between 3 stars and 5 stars, so kind of hit and miss. This one I've heard mixed reviews on so far. A few people have been pretty disappointed, but I have seen a couple people also enjoy it, so I'm gonna give it a fair chance. I believe this is kind of like a dark academia set at a college type thriller where the it girl turns up dead, and so everyone else is trying to figure out who did that and if other people are at risk of being killed. By far the biggest complaint that I've seen on this one is that it's too long because it's over 400 pages. But luckily it is also on Scribd as an audiobook, so I do plan on picking up the audio version to help me speed through it. And then the third book that I picked up is not one that I have been anticipating all year, but recently I've been seeing a lot of amazing reviews for this book. And after reading the synopsis, I was like, that sounds like something I could really be into. So that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This, I believe, is a contemporary book and possibly a romance between people who are video game developers. So as far as I understand, it's not sci-fi because it is all in the real world, but they do work in the tech industry and work on video games. So there's a little bit of that video game element for the people who like that. I definitely do. I am into that, and I hear the characters in this are just amazing. So I can't wait to dive in, get to know these characters, get to know this story, and just be as in love with it as I'm seeing everyone else be. I also have an audiobook of this through Libro.fm and their ALC program. So very excited to read it via that format as well. Also, the spine of this book is amazing. So if you can't tell, I am just itching to get to every single one of these books. I have high expectations, high hopes, especially these 2 I think could legitimately be favorites of the year. So I'm gonna do something maybe not advisable and start with the one that I have the lowest expectations for. Also the one that I think is going to be the slowest and the toughest to get into. So I'm gonna get started reading this. I'm gonna pop in the audiobook as I go to pick up my kids from daycare. And I will be back once I'm well into this book and can give a little bit better of a synopsis and my initial thoughts on how it's going. Alright, I've been listening to The It Girl for what feels like forever. The audiobook is 17 hours long. It's on Scribd, so I can only go up to 2 times speed on my phone. So I've been doing that, just chugging along. I listened for quite a bit last night and then again what feels like all day today, and I am 45% in. And it's okay. This is just not a premise that is super intriguing to me to begin with. In this book, we are following a main character named Hannah who went to college and was roommates with this girl named April. And April was super rich, very privileged. She was kind of the it girl on campus. Everyone wanted to be her. She was good at everything she did. And Hannah kind of always considered herself really lucky to have been paired with her as her roommate, because then she was automatically included in like April's group of friends. And this book is told in alternating timelines. One timeline is in college. We start with the meeting of Hannah and April, and then we go through their years in college. And then the other timeline is a few years into the future after April was murdered. And what had happened was there was this old man who worked at the college who was accused of the murder, found guilty, was in prison, and then he died in prison. So now this murder is being basically drugged back into the news as people try to find out again what really happened, because that old guy claimed till the day of his death that he was not responsible for April's murder. And so there are people that believe he was wrongfully arrested, wrongfully convicted guilty, and it was a big injustice that he spent the rest of his life in jail. At this point, I don't really have much more to say than that. There's a group of characters that were all of April's friends, and I think it's going to come out that they all kind of have secrets. And Hannah is kind of reconnecting with each of them in the present day timeline, trying to figure out what they all know about what really happened to April, and basically come to her own conclusion about if that guy was innocent or guilty. I have theories. I had one theory pretty early on for what I think actually happened, and that's already been brought up as a potential theory by our main character, which actually tells me that's probably not it. So I'm a little bit thrown off the scent, and I'm thinking it must be something else, something that will kind of come out of left field. At least that's what I'm hoping, because I like to be surprised in thrillers, and usually Ruth Ware likes to throw in a twist or two at the end, but who knows if I am on the right track or if I'm way off or what is going to happen at the end of this book. So I'm going to continue listening. I'll probably just check in once I've finished, because this is a pretty slow burn of a mystery, and I know it's just going to unfold the further we go along, and I'm obviously not going to be able to talk about everything that's happening because it's a mystery. So I'll just tell you what I think at the very end. If I think it's worth all 420 pages and 17 hours of audiobook listening, I'll let you know. So I will see you later. Okay, good news. I have finished The It Girl, and I have relatively good feelings about it. As I was saying, this is a pretty run-of-the-mill thriller in my opinion as far as plot goes. It wasn't an overly original premise in my opinion, so I do think I went in with kind of tempered expectations, knowing that that kind of plot wasn't going to be brand new for me, super surprising. Also because reviews I've seen for this book have been mixed, and I think that overall that helped me just temper my expectations and be open to this book for what it is. And overall, with that in mind, I enjoyed it. I definitely think having the audiobook helped me get through it quickly enough that I didn't feel like it was overly long. I know that that is a lot of people's complaint about this book, or their trepidation about this book. I think it will inhibit people from picking it up in the first place, just because for some reason it looks and feels more daunting than your average mystery thriller. To me, it never really lagged. That being said, overall, it's a relatively slow pace, so it's not like it's going to be action-packed the whole entire time, but it's just like a steady moving mystery. Based on the plot itself and the setup, I knew that this book would have to have a pretty remarkable twist or ending in order for me to be in love with it at the end, and that didn't happen. So this definitely is not a 5-star book or a 5-star thriller, but I was ultimately satisfying with the resolution of this book. I did think the last like 25% of it was the most interesting and the most exciting. And being that it's kind of a whodunit type story, I was definitely kept guessing until pretty close to the end, and I think that's a good sign. I think I did say in my previous clip that I had a feeling I knew who did it, and I was wrong, so that is a good thing. I personally like being surprised in a thriller more than I like being able to guess the ending. So with all that being said, no, this is definitely not a new all-time favorite thriller or anything like that. I don't think this will be most people's new favorite Ruth Ware book. I would definitely say this is closest to The Lying Game by her, because it is set mostly at a school and does have a lot to do with like friend and classmate relationships. So if you happen to have liked that one, I definitely think you'll like this one. In terms of ranking this book in all of Ruth Ware's books, I have read all of them up to this point. I think this book will go into the 4th place slot. I gave The Turn of the Key 5 stars. That's definitely my favorite by her, and I do think this book is very different from that one, mainly in plot and in setting and characters, because this is, again, set at a school with students. That one is a woman who is a nanny for children. This one is more of a whodunit. That one is more of a trying to find out history. So very different. That one's still my favorite. And then I also gave One by One and In a Dark Dark Wood both 4 stars. And I think I'm gonna land at 3 stars for this one, closer to 3.5. So I'm gonna put it at that 4th place spot above all of Ruth Ware's other books, which, if I remember correctly, only includes The Woman in Cabin 10 and The Death of Mrs. Westaway. I gave those also both 3 stars. So not terrible, not great, kind of what I was expecting going into this book. I am glad to have read it though. I probably will continue keeping up with Ruth Ware's releases because in the end it was still an entertaining, interesting, and satisfying thriller. With that, time to move on to the next book that I am so excited for and really hope I love. I'm ready to start reading Upgrade. I just cannot wait to get into this book. This one unfortunately does not have an audiobook on Scribd or Hoopla that I can find. I'm sure it has one on like Audible or Libro, but I don't want to spend a full credit on this book. I can definitely just read it with my eyes. So that is the plan. So hopefully it will just take me a day or two to get through. Today is Monday, and on Wednesday we are leaving for a camping trip. My extended family goes camping every summer, and this year we're leaving on a Wednesday to have a nice extra long weekend to go camping. We're bringing the kids, we're bringing our pop-up camper. It's going to be a very busy but fun time. So my plans and hopes would be to finish this before that so that on the camping trip I can just bring tomorrow and read that one while we're camping. And then when I come home, I could edit this video, get it up for you. So that is the plan. I'm just speaking it into existence so that it's more likely to happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into this book, and I will be back with an update once I can tell you a little bit more about the plot and what my initial thoughts are of it. All right, I have a quick update for Upgrade because I have read a bit, which, by the way, I posted this on Instagram the other day. I have a million bookmarks. I have literally dozens of bookmarks by artists that I love, that I've paid for. I have them all together in a nice little collection, and yet I use a sticky note because sometimes it's just too far to walk to go get a nice bookmark, you know what I mean? Okay, I am on page 86 of Upgrade, and this book is a doozy so far, you guys. I think I would say that this is the most science-y of any of Blake Crouch's books that I've read so far. And I'm not feeling stupid. Like, I do think it's well explained and I'm getting the basics of what's going on, but my husband actually read this book before me and he told me, hey, you should listen to this podcast that I listened to a couple years ago about DNA to get like a baseline of what DNA is and how it works. And I was like, yeah, whatever, I probably don't need to do that. I have trust in Blake to make the book, you know, still accessible and understandable even without a good understanding about DNA. But now I wish that I knew a little bit more about DNA. So this book, I think, is best with a very vague synopsis. I don't want to tell you too much, so I will just tell you that we are following this guy named Logan. He lives in this futuristic world where people can alter genes, and that is illegal because they don't want people altering their own genes or each other's genes or like animals' genes or altering things to mess up the general like way of the world, you know what I mean? And so this guy Logan is an enforcer of that, and he's trying to catch bad guys who are altering genes. And then something happens early on in this book where Logan starts to feel different. And that's all I'm gonna say. And I'm just getting to the point now where things are starting to pick up a little and get interesting. The first chunk of this book has just been a lot of like description of the science and about what kind of genes have been altered in this world and what effect that's had on the world. And so it's interesting, but it's a lot. I'm excited to get more into the actual plot and more into the characters, because I think that's something that Blake Crouch does well, is make you care about his characters even though the plots are still interesting. And of course there's still a major sci-fi plot going on. I still really like his characters, and that's why Recursion has been my favorite of his so far, is because I loved those characters. So I'm hoping this book is the same way. Definitely going to keep an open mind as I go into the rest of it. But I was a little surprised that that was my first reaction at the beginning of this book, is that it's pretty sciencey, because I like science in my science fiction. So I'm not scared of it, but I definitely am going to be aware of that and how I pitch it to other people, if that's going to be a major deterrent for other people to pick this book up. So I'm going to finish reading that. Today's the day we are leaving for camping, so I'm a little behind schedule in terms of I wanted this book to be done by the time we left. That's probably not going to happen, but I will bring it with me. I'll probably be able to read it on the drive a little bit, unless I'm the one driving. We'll see how that goes, but I will be back with an update when I have more to say about it, and I will see you then. Hello. You are balanced very precariously on a stack of Kleenex boxes, so hope you don't fall. Today is Monday, and I have not talked to you in several days. I don't actually remember what day I talked to you last, but I was reading Upgrade, and I was hoping to finish that several days ago. But as is my life, it took me longer than expected. So I'm finally here to talk about this book because I did finally finish it yesterday. And where to start? You know, the funny thing about expectations, the disappointing thing about expectations, is that everything can't always live up to them. And I experienced that with this book, and it's leaving me in a really weird place where I'm like, was I disappointed by this book because it wasn't as good, or was my crazy life over this last week a little too crazy that it distracted me from the book and just made my reading experience not as good, which made me think the book was not as good? I don't know, because there's nothing about this book that I disliked. And when thinking about like the plot and the characters and Blake Crouch's writing, I liked all of it, and it was in line with his past two books. So in theory, I should have loved this book as much as I loved those previous two books. But for some reason, I just was not as engaged with this book as I was with those. And again, it was a crazy week when I was reading this. We were traveling. I was trying to squeeze this in like really short bursts. And I prefer to have time to sit down and really read longer chunks of a book. I feel like I connect to them better that way. And I feel like that hindered my experience in this one because I never really got fully immersed in it. So I don't know. I think my rating is going to be 3 stars. I think if I would have read this differently at a different time, maybe when I did have time to connect to it more, it might have been like a 4-star, but unfortunately to me this just didn't hit like Dark Matter and Recursion. So I know it's not a 5-star, but it feels unfair for me to say I didn't like it and to not recommend it, because I think it's perfectly in line with his other books. The difference is this is heavily focused on DNA, which I think is probably a different audience than Dark Matter and Recursion, focusing more on like alternate realities type of sci-fi. I feel like that's a little bit more accessible for a lot of people, or more people who don't like sci-fi can get on board with those. I don't know if that's just my opinion or if that's real. Whereas DNA feels much more specific and like a certain, why do you keep falling down? Like somebody might not like that type of science in a sci-fi book, so it might not appeal to as wide of a range of people. This book also has a very major moral question or kind of moral dilemma about potentially saving the human race and like who has authority to do that, what is the best way to do that, the question of sacrificing lives to save the greater population of people I found that to be really interesting, and my husband and I had a really good conversation about that afterwards. We talked just for a long time about, you know, what are each of our opinions on that? How did this book address that? And I do wish that this book addressed that more. I feel like in this book we really only got 2 viewpoints, and I feel like there's some nuance there, and it didn't quite go there in discussing that nuance. So I don't know. As you can tell, I'm just left with a very like unsure kind of meh opinion about the book, and that bums me out a lot because I think Blake Crouch did still do a great job with this book, and I don't know what I would necessarily change in it to make it better. So I'm bummed by that. I would still recommend it if you are a big Blake Crouch fan, if you have a particular interest in DNA, genetic modifying, that type of thing. Of course, I think you should read this, and I would still like to discuss it with people. So if you've read it and want to talk a little bit about it, feel free to comment or, you know, head over to my Instagram and message me, because I think it sparks good conversation. I just didn't connect to the plot and characters of this book specifically as much as I was hoping and expecting to. So it's a 3-star for me. Okay, we are on to the 3rd and final book for this video. I hope that this one redeems the whole video and gives me the 5-star I've been craving and hoping for. I have the audio for this one, which I think will help me get through it more quickly, which will be great for my reading experience. I've got a couple meetings coming up here for work this morning, and then the rest of the afternoon I should be able to listen to an audiobook for the most part while I'm working. So I should be able to get a good chunk of the way into this. So that is the plan. I will be back when I can give a synopsis for this book and some of my initial thoughts. All right, same day, it is later, and I am 22% into tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So I thought now would be a good time to check in and tell you my initial thoughts and a little bit more about the premise of this book. It's a little hard to describe this book because it's kind of one of those books that's a little bit plotless. You're kind of just following characters through their lives, and that's it. This follows 2 characters named Sam and Sadie, and they met initially when they were kids. They formed a friendship through a unique situation, which I think is kind of fun to let play out and not know exactly that backstory. So I'm not going to say what that is, but I really enjoyed that initial part of this book, finding out how they became friends as kids. They did have a falling out that caused them to not really keep in touch after that, but they had formed a really strong bond, specifically over video games and playing video games together. And then we meet these characters again when they are in college. Both of them are pursuing video game creation as a career. They meet each other again, they reconnect, and then they have an idea to design a video game together. And that's about where I am in the book, where they're in the midst of developing that game. And from my understanding, it sounds like that game is going to become a sensation and like super popular. So these 2 characters are going to be co-workers for this very popular, famous video game. And I think it's going to be kind of an exploration of their relationship, because they are not only friends and maybe have more feelings for each other, but also business partners and like creative partners. So I'm finding it interesting. I'm a little worried about how much time this is going to span. I, for some reason, just don't connect with books that follow characters for like their entire lives. I like shorter time spans that have like a very clear objective or some like life event that characters are going through rather than their entire lives. So we will see. I've seen the number 30 years thrown around, like following them for 30 years of their lives. So that's definitely not like 80 years, but still feels like quite a bit of time. So we'll see how that develops. So far I'm interested, and I feel like it's going to be one of those books that is kind of slow the whole way, and then at the end probably is gonna hit you just with like the culmination of all this time you've spent with these characters, getting to know them on a really deep level, and at the end looking back and be like, wow, I've really come to care about these people, and whatever the ending is, you become really invested just because of that amount of time. So hopefully that's the case for me. Hopefully I end up falling in love with them, going to continue on listening to it at a fast pace, and I will let you know what I think of it later. Also, I wanted to mention, I had no idea this author has written actually several other books. The one that I recognize is, what is it called again? Memoirs of a Teenage Amnesiac. I actually read that book almost exactly a year ago, though it was published in 2007, and I really enjoyed that one. That was a contemporary book about a teenage girl who has an accident and loses her recent memory of the last like 4 years of her life or something like that. So very different vibe, but I really enjoyed that one. So I'm hoping that, you know, that trend continues and I enjoy this one, and maybe I will explore more of Gabrielle Zevin's backlist. That would be exciting. But yeah, anyway, gonna get back to listening to this. Just wanted to quick check in with that little update, hoping to have even more for you very soon. Okay, I just finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I have a lot of thoughts running through my head right now. This book is sad. Overall, it's a sad book. And normally I enjoy emotional stories. I feel like I say that a lot, especially saying that I like emotional romances. This book is not a romance, and I don't think the book is claiming to be. The last line of the synopsis says, yes, it is a love story, but it is not one you have read before. And there is love in this book. There's no romance. I've seen reviews that agree with that, and yet this book is still, its third top genre is listed as romance. And I would just like to make that very, very clear that this is not a romance. It is a very hard-hitting and sad contemporary book. That being said, even in my emotional books, which I do enjoy, I still like there to be some happiness. Not even necessarily a happy ending, but like moments of happiness. And I just didn't feel like these characters had any happiness in them. And again, I feel like the book acknowledged that. So I feel like the book knows what it is. There were a couple of lines, like one said something like, I'm gonna butcher the exact quote, I didn't mark it or anything, but it's like, the best art is made by unhappy people or something like that. And then later in the book, these two characters are talking about their relationship, two characters being Sadie and Sam, and they're like, we just make each other miserable, which is true. This whole book is just sadness. And it's not because they don't have success, they definitely do. It's not because they don't have love and relationships in their lives, they do. It's just like these characters are never satisfied, and I didn't love reading that. I did like parts of this book. I really liked the video game elements of it. It is pretty heavy in the description of the video games that these characters create. I don't know what kind of background this author has in video game creation, but it felt very in-depth to me in terms of all of the work that goes into creating video games and managing not only the creative side of building video games, but also the business side of marketing video games and trying to follow up a successful video game with another successful video game. I liked all of that. And there's a character named Marks in this book who is kind of like their business partner, business person. He's probably my favorite character because he was the most involved with that side of the video game business. And if anyone had any joy in their lives, I think it was him. Whereas Sadie and Sam both were just miserable the whole time. And I did love that. Other things to note, Sam does have a physical disability, which I think is worth saying if anyone is searching out disability rep in their books or anything like that. This has that, and of course that plays into his emotional journey. This is also set up differently than I was expecting when you learn that these characters, you know, were friends when they were kids, had a falling out, and then are reconnecting as adults. You really get very little about their childhood. You just get like the background information about what happened, and then very early on, like within the first 25%, you get them meeting back in college, and then you get many years as they are adults, like probably 10 to 20 years as adults. So it felt less like a second chance type situation and just like an adult contemporary story with characters who happened to have met when they were children, but like that's not really that important. I don't know. It just spanned a long amount of time, which is something that typically I don't like in books. I don't think that helped this book in my view. Some people do really like that type of story, so maybe this would be more catered towards you if you like that type of book. So I guess I'm left to figure out my rating, and I'm a little torn because my enjoyment of this book was pretty low. My disappointment after having such high expectations for this book, is very large. But I don't know if I want to directly rate this book low, because again, I feel like this book knows what it is. I feel like it's trying to market itself correctly, and I'm seeing people love it, so I know it is reaching its audience, and I hope that those people continue to promote it in the right way so that it continues to reach that target audience. So I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars. My enjoyment was more of a 2, but that's not because it's a bad book by any means. It's my personal preference that made the enjoyment low, so I want to make sure it doesn't come off like I'm bashing this book or saying it's bad. So that's why I'm going to do 3 stars instead of 2 stars, because 3 stars still, I think, indicates it's a solid book. So with that, to wrap up the entire video, I don't know if this has happened before in one of my book of the month reading vlogs, I don't remember, but I've got 3 3-star books, which is a little disappointing, especially given how excited I was for these books at the beginning of this vlog. I had very high hopes and none of them quite lived up to those hopes, but as always, I'm still glad to have read them. I feel like they still gave me very different emotions, and like each 3-star rating is still very different from each other, so I don't regret having read them. I do plan to keep all of them for my collection, Ruth Ware and Blake Crouch, because they're favorite authors, and this one I love the cover, so I'm sure I will keep this for my shelves to display for a long time to come, even though it wasn't my favorite book. So yeah, still glad to have them, glad to have read them, glad to be able to share my thoughts. Hopefully this is still helpful. If you're someone who has slightly different reading tastes from me, I still think you might enjoy some of these books, so hopefully I was able to convey that. But I think that's all I have to say about it. So please let me know if you've read any of these books. What were your thoughts? Did you enjoy them more than I did? Or if you didn't get these books, but you've been getting other books from Book of the Month, what have you been getting? What have you been reading? Please tell me about it. And other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.